Red, It Isn't Blue is Dorian Gray here for you.
Hey, I reached out to Doug Stanhope and Tim Dillon, preferably Doug Stanhope, to get him to the Phoenix event on August 19th. And then I found out that he's got a guy to contact, Mr. Hannigan. And I reached out to him. You know, he's only 2 hours away. Doug Stanhope, my first choice.
I'm Doug Stanhope, and that's why I drink.
Yeah, he's a funny guy. Down there at Bisbee, Arizona, I guess is where he lives. So he should come on by. You know, these glasses are cool because it makes this look yellow. Is this yellow?
No, that's orange. It's orange.
Because with these glasses on, it looks yellow.
Well, guess what? It's actually orange. But, you know, it's all relative, right? It's whatever you see.
It's a filter. Is this yellow? Is this yellow?
No, it's orange. Why are you talking like that? Why do you have that squeaky, foam voice?
I don't know.
Squeaky Kaiser. So, Max, let's talk about some stuff relating to Bitcoin and stuff like that. So, hyperbitcoinization is here. It's real. It's happening. You'll find out that soon in the upcoming interview with Dredd. He has some interesting observations of what he saw in El Salvador recently, and he's on his way back there. But, you know, one thing we're also doing on Kaiser Report is as we head into August 15th is the Nixon shock anniversary. 50 years ago on August 15th, we closed the gold window and pulled the dollar off the gold standard, and it's been an all fiat world since. So I was, I've been really thinking about the dollar in this moment, and I'm thinking like, you know, the portrait of Dorian Gray.
Sure do.
Right? I'm going to read you the Wikipedia synopsis of it so you understand why this analogy might apply to what happened. What the US dollar is the portrait of Dorian Gray, in my opinion. So Dorian Gray is the subject of a full-length portrait in oil by Basil Hallward is what happens in the book, the short novel. An artist impressed and infatuated by Dorian's beauty. He believes that Dorian's beauty is responsible for the new mood in his art as a painter. Through Basil, Dorian meets Lord Henry Wotton, and he soon is enthralled by the aristocrat's hedonistic worldview, that beauty and sensual fulfillment are the only things worth pursuing in life. Newly understanding that his beauty will fade, however, Dorian expresses the desire to sell his soul to ensure that the picture, rather than he, will age and fade. The wish is granted, and Dorian pursues a libertine life of varied, amoral experiences while staying young and beautiful. All the while, his portrait ages and records every sin.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great story. And nobody's named Basil anymore, are they?
No, not really. Not since Basil Fawlty. But that was from Oscar Wilde. So, and he was almost arrested when this was first published. But the thing is, like, you know, so in 1971, that was after, it was in the midst of the Vietnam War. The United States was going bankrupt, financing these wars. As we know, France sent a naval ship into the port of New York, collected their $300 million worth of gold. Then the game theory is that the United Kingdom, Britain, was like, now we should ask for our gold back, because if the French were smart enough to figure this out, maybe we don't want to get left holding the bag. Well, they got left holding the bag because we closed the gold window and we didn't give them their gold. We sent them $300 million in paper. But, you know, since then, look at the immoral, amoral, hedonistic, libertine lifestyle, essentially, of our economy. The facts of our economy is how hedonistic it was to just like ship all your wealth creation to China. Like, how decadent is that, right? It's totally decadent to just like say, here's our wealth creation. Here's our manufacturing base. We're just going to send it to China. I think that's just like, that's Dorian Gray.
Right. The U.S. remained looking fabulous for 20 years.
Yes.
And meanwhile, the haggard face of the economy in decay was kept in a closet somewhere in Wuhan, and then finally came out.
Oh my God. Yeah. And that's what is being unleashed. And, hyperbitcoinization is really exposing this. I mean, it was there right in front of our eyes. We could all see it, but nobody knew how to articulate what they were seeing, because in an all fiat world, it was all just relative. They're like, what are you going to do? Are you going to adopt the euro? You're going to adopt the yuan, the yen? But now they couldn't do gold, right? Because gold is owned by the central banks. They hoard all of that. So along comes Bitcoin, and it exposes the whole Dorian Gray like nature of this situation. And now, 50 years later, we're at this like, they're offering decay as a service, right? They want you to have expiring digital dollars. So it's like just utter decay. If you don't spend this, it's going to decay and rot.
Right. I like this word libertine because it sounds like libertarian, and I think libertarianism is a certain libertine attitude toward economics that, free markets just work by themselves. You're kind of selling your soul to the devil when you say that, because as even Adam Smith argued, free markets without regulation are sucky. So I agree. We've got a moment here where the worms are crawling out of the skull of the dead, fleshy, zombie-like corpse of the American economy.
I mean, the important thing as well for me is that, Dorian sold his soul for this. He understood what he was doing and what the trade-off was. The United States also, the elite of that time and the elite of today knew about the Triffin dilemma. They knew this was coming. They knew that the economy itself would rot. They knew that their money would rot. They knew that society would rot. They knew this because we see the records. We know the records from Bretton Woods. We know that they discussed the Triffin dilemma. We know that they knew that if you were going to decide with what the U.S. wanted versus what the rest of the world wanted, which was like a bancor, a basket of currencies and some commodities in there, that they knew that if if a domestic currency was made the international reserve currency, that those would always be in conflict, the domestic versus international. Now, the U.S. as a reserve currency does give an exorbitant privilege to a certain small group of people that have huge, enormous power around the world. They could smite any of their enemies. We have the monopoly globally on force, right? And violence. So our elite control that. So that is what the dollar gives them. But they made this deal. They sold the American soul to the devil. They knew in 1945 that 1971 would come. They knew that's what happens with the Triffin dilemma. You have to send your gold overseas. And it kept on going overseas, and our national wealth was being depleted. Our national gold reserves were being depleted. So what comes next? Well, they closed that gold window. They knew what would happen. In order to maintain the dollar as reserve currency, you need to keep on sending dollars overseas. What happened? What did they need to do? You needed to send your manufacturing base overseas. That was the part of the deal with the global reserve fiat devil.
Yeah. And all the while, the libertarians are out partying all night long without any of the effects, because they've got all that magical money tree shaking. And then it all comes crashing home. It comes back. The chickens come home to roost.
Well, the whole thing, I think, is libertine from top to bottom, from all ideologies and whatnot. Like, if you're part of this fiat system, it is by nature immoral. the inflation is theft. Inflation causes these riots all over the world happening right now because of the food price inflation. When you have 600-pound people, that's totally decadent, right? That's decadent. That's utter decadence to have that many people weighing that much.
Yeah, this inflation question is really becoming amusing, right? Because everyone was totally ignoring it for so long, and some were warning about it. We were warning about it. So now that it's out in the open and breaking out, you've got Joe Biden making comments about it. He said that, according to Moody's, they told him that if that multi-trillion-dollar stimulus package he's going to release will not be inflationary. Because according to Moody's, it's actually de-inflationary. So this brings back many things that we've pointed out a few times. First of all, let's talk about Moody's. It's hugely owned by Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett just got fined for a conflict of interest between Berkshire Hathaway, his company, and Moody's. And Moody's is a notorious pay-to-play operation. It's a rating agency for debt, and people pay to get a good rating. It's a total scam, has been for years. Warren Buffett is involved. So they told him what he wanted to hear, that this money printing wouldn't be inflationary. It would be, in fact, deflationary, which brings me to point number 2. One of the reasons why people don't understand the inflation conundrum that the U.S. economy now faces on a protracted basis, on a secular basis, not on a temporary basis, is because policymakers and the President of the United States and the Wall Street establishment keep referring to inflation as deflation. It's total newspeak. It's total garbage speak. It's sophistry. It's propaganda. It's gaslighting. They think that just calling white black and saying 2 + 2 = 5, that's going to solve all the problems. AOC was on TV and interviewed on TV, miming and mimicking all the talking points. So it's transitory. It's not really inflation. You don't have to look at the whole economy. Just like doing all this pretzel logic, putting herself in contortionist, lying through her teeth. And that's going to get exacerbated to incredible degrees. We're going to see dancing, singing, lying, politicians out there, there's no inflation, there's no inflation, the musical on Broadway, starring Nancy Pelosi and AOC, special appearance by Joe Biden. There's no inflation, it's deflation. I love you, darling. You're so deflationary. And, to the extent they're going to have to push negative interest rates, subscription money that expires in 18 months, and a transition from an open, free democracy to a gulag casino is going to be to the tune of Sondheim, book by not Harvey Weinstein, but the other guy, Harvey Wallbanger. No, can never remember his name. It's going to be on Broadway. Firestein. It's going to have Alec Baldwin stars as inflation, and he's going to eat his way through 3 acts on Broadway until he gains another 100 pounds. And it's all going to be in a faux Spanish accent like his wife. It's going to be fucking great. West Side Story meets Kinky Boots right now on Broadway, starring inflation. That's what's coming. It's going to be the worst. It's like Springtime for Hitler in that movie, The Producers. Remember that, which started out as a Broadway show, as I recall. And, get ready for it now. Get your tickets. But get them quick because the price is going up.
So the portrait of Dorian Gray, how you can see it, the decaying painting. The painting held all the age and decay and grotesquerie, right? So just take your camera lens and look at Venice Beach, California. The homeless encampments, the people living in tents. Look at San Francisco, people pooping on the streets, stealing, looting all the shops. Look in the Midwest, the Rust Belt. Look at all the opioid overdoses. Like everywhere you point your camera on the grand landscape called America, you see all the decay while the dollar stays, the king dollar, the mighty dollar, it's the reserve currency. We're number 1 of the world. It's like, yeah, okay, it looks great, hot, super hot, still has, George Washington there on it, looking great as ever, hasn't aged a day.
No, George Washington has not aged a day on the currency. It's the portrait of George Washington, printed by the trillions. coming out of the Central Federal Bank of Treasury Department. And you look around and you see nothing but rot.
You see the rot if you look. I mean, it's there. It's not even, it's just grotesquerie, right?
It's not hidden in the attic. It's right in front of your face.
It was hidden in the attic for a while, in terms of like, while we still had jobs, you know, it was kind of a slow motion, like, well, the decay happened slowly, right? It's 50 years since we went off the gold standard. So in that 50 years, we're at that moment today, right now, where the decay is everywhere. The decline in life expectancy, the rise in mortality, the rise in obesity, the rise in homelessness, the rise in, you know, the latest polls show like interracial strife and disharmony. And it's just like everything's negative because of the portrait of Dorian Gray, that because of the deal that our elite did with the fiat devil. I think
so true.
You know,
this musical is really shaping up. That's a great book right there. This is going to be a great show.
Tequila is going to star in it somehow, right?
She's going to be singing a solo in Act 2.
Tequila dies of an overdose.
Here's Plucky. Plucky is it could be like Cabaret, and Plucky is the MC. Wunderbar, welcome, bienvenue to Overdose Cabaret. Da, 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 da. I'm Plucky. Plucky.
So, I mean, Neeraj Agrawal said,
Who the hell is that?
He's a guy at Coin Center, and he's does a lot of funny memes and tweets and about crypto.
Oh, that guy,
Twitter.
yeah, he's funny.
Yeah. Anyway, so when he was looking at that New York Times op-ed piece a few days ago, we covered it on our microdose. What Neeraj said and pointed out with the piece is that New York Times publishes an op-ed making the case for CBDC. Some benefits, according to the New York Times, include, quote, power to shrink people's balances if they don't spend enough fast enough, 2, full surveillance to prevent illegal activity, and 3, lower transaction costs. So surveillance state and forced consumption. I mean, what do you even call this? Like, it is like what you said, the foie gras farm. Like,
yep, foie gras farm.
Power to shrink people's balances. That's like
gavage. That's where they force the ducks to eat the grain to get their livers extended. Then they pull the liver out and sell it in the supermarket somewhere in Lyon.
I mean, shrink people's balances. How Orwellian is that, right? This is like Portrait of Dorian Gray grotesquerie. Like, if you go into somebody's house, or as Max always used that analogy of siphoning somebody's gasoline.
Oh yeah,
you just shrunk the balance in their gas tank.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's interesting because both this gentleman, Neeraj, and Nick Carter, who they're mostly based in D.C., Washington, D.C.
They're both, in fact, entirely based there.
They're in D.C. They're like millennials, and they are, I think, are known for having navigated a path through the Bitcoin lunacy that, with being both informative as well as being, not buying into all the shit posting that certainly I've succumbed to many years ago, and you can see what's happened to me. But nevertheless, these two guys, when I follow them, you can sense that they are now becoming a bit alarmed because they're right there in the belly of the beast. And all the fucking worst scenario stuff is happening, right? And they're like, what the fuck is this, man? My country's being ripped from my arms right here in my home. And I sense the millennials are waking up to this.
Actually, Nick is in New York. I believe he's in Brooklyn.
Fine.
But he's his evolution, his growth as a human is pretty fascinating. It's dramatic and awesome to watch him become like the face of Bitcoin for sure.
I think it's all about the writing. He's a very studious and disciplined writer. And that's the key. I always tell people, they say, Max, how do I become more like you? And I say, well, first thing you do is you start writing. This is what I started doing when I was very young. And then it took me to places that I never knew I would ever go. And then once I got there, I had to stop writing because I didn't want to go any further.
Well, also, Neeraj is in Washington, D.C., and like they're the equivalent of the Dorian Gray, the person, not the portrait. Like they're the ones that sold our economy to the devil, the fiat devil. Like they're the ones that did this. So
Right.
they all look great, right? They have
Right.
like fantastic health care. They've got like
Right.
guaranteed retirement, even one term in Congress, and you get like an amazing retirement for life. And so it's hard. It's perhaps harder to see from inside that fishbowl of like how rotten it is compared to being outside it in the financial
Right.
center.
They're actually in the living room of Dorian Gray.
Yeah,
They're in
yeah.
Dorian Gray's living. Yeah, well, totally. I think it's a great, really analogy for it all. It's that it's all happening. What happens at the end of the book or whatever? I mean, it all comes crashing down. Exactly. What's the denouement?
Yeah. All I
Yeah.
remember is the horror of the painting, and I think somebody discovers it and realizes that's why you're always
I
saying.
think, yeah, they see the painting and
Yeah.
the whole thing. So, China will see ultimately that the dollar is worthless and they're going to dump it all.
Well, yeah, they are. They're doing that already.
Right.
I saw that in the news this week, actually, that they said not just China, but 20% of the world's central banks. So there's a lot of other countries out there, and
Right.
they're also considering. Well, they're also planning on dumping more of their dollars. So
Right. So
it's
the
already
George
happening.
Washington is the Trump that looks ugly to them suddenly. That doesn't look like the fresh, clean revolutionary general from 1776.
Well, because like you're hanging out with Dorian Gray, it's like all fab, like, and like 10 years later, you're still hanging out with Dorian Gray. You yourself have some gray hairs and wrinkles, and Dorian keeps on looking like fantastic, and you're starting to suspect something's kind of weird. Then you're an old person, you're nearly in the old folks home, and Dorian's still out there like dancing and having a party and looking great. And then you see the portrait and you realize like, this is kind of creepy. Like there's something not right here. And I don't want to hang out with Dorian anymore because this is like a weird situation. So when all of these stories are unfolding, when you see all these things, that the elite, the ones who sold our economic soul to the fiat devil, the elite tell us that it's disinformation, it's misinformation, it's Putin is telling you this, things like that. They tell you it's fake news. But in fact, like what they tell you is fake news. The items they list as fake news are of the Dorian Gray quality of it, of the portrait of Dorian Gray. That it's all like decay and overdoses and homelessness and despair, deaths of despair. All that's what is the fact. This is 50 years later. What the horror that started 50 years ago. This is the decay captured in the economy. But the good thing is that Bitcoin has revealed this, and now you could all step away, especially the young people. You don't need to even be engaged in this. Like we've been hanging out partying with the dollar for the last 50 years, and
Totally.
it's dawned on us like we're only seeing this 50 years later, going, holy cow! I was dancing and hanging out and living a decadent lifestyle, a high time
Yeah, I
preference
remember
lifestyle.
back in the early 80s, it was only maybe 3 or 4 years since they invented the automatic teller machine. And my early years on Wall Street, you would just go downstairs to Citibank, type in some numbers, and just cash pours out of the wall. And you're going down to the bars and clubs. And it's just like, this is incredible. I just spend some few minutes on the phone upstairs, and I push a button and money pours out of the wall. Where's my party? So it's just been like that for 30, 40 years.
Yeah. And Biden.
Yeah. Instead of,
Biden's still trapped there 50 years ago. Like, huh? Hey, yeah, who's this? Who are you? Like, as I was saying, this is the orange. Who's the orange? I'm not being personal.
Where's Corn Pop in all
Where's
this?
Corn Pop?
He was a bad dude. That's for sure. Now, who do we got as a guest?
Right.
Honey Bunny.
So we're going to turn now to our guest, who is Bobo Dread. You know him as Dread. I forgot to ask him about his Olympics thing. Like he had been in the Olympics, or had tried out for the Olympics.
On the Jamaican bobsled team?
No, on the pole vaulting.
No shit.
Yeah. So I forgot to ask him about that. But I did accidentally think it was music. But music and pole dancing.
Pole dancing? I didn't know Dread was a pole dancer. That's something I would have enjoyed talking to him about, given my experience pole dancing. Those things go together like Rastafari and Bob Marley.
Pole vaulting.
Pole vaulting dancing. Pole dancing and vaulting. It's a combination. You see a woman in scantily clad bikini pole vaulting over the club where her friends are pole dancing.
Check it out.
All right, let's get into this now with Dread of One Love Podcast out of Jamaica. Now, we've been doing this for a long time, and we have seen a lot of young stars emerge over the years, and Dread is a name that keeps coming up. I keep saying, hey, we're going to talk to Dread. They're like, yeah, he's the new Jack Mahlers. He's the new kid. He's the new star. And it's all around PlebNet and all this stuff happening on Lightning, right? So he's like the Lightning man. So we got to check in with Dread. Welcome, Dread.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Right. Well, what I know most about you is that your girth is huge. Tell us, to those who don't understand this whole Lightning network, like, what is PlebNet? Why is your girth so big? Why does your girth matter?
These are very good questions that need answers. Girth is really a slang that we use in PlebNet to mean the size of your channel. Like, it really takes cojones to have a channel that's big enough to, lock up your funds in a 2x2 multi-sig. So the more size you have in your channel, the more girth people say you have. And I've been an avid supporter and participant in PlebNet from the beginning, when we were just like sending 10 sat, 100 sat tips to people and playing little gambling games with fiat Jaff's LNTX spot. So had to fiat Jaff. And, it just became a thing where you wanted to see exactly how much you could stress test the system. Like, how much girth can the Lightning Network handle, with just me, with all the plebs together, sending back and forth, connecting with big other organizations that have a lot of girth as well. Like, places like, Bitcoin Beach has a huge channel that's much more girthy than mine. So I think, it's one of those things you kind of, you love to hear. It's very provocative, and then it makes people curious. So everybody out there who wants to have more girth should try to get more girth, because girth is good. But I'll also say that girth isn't the only thing that matters. It's not the girth of your channel, it's how you use it and how much you balance it. And that's very important. So.
Right. So let's take that into, PlebNet. And so let's talk about PlebNet. What is PlebNet? How old is it? It's pretty new, right? And tell us about it.
Yeah, it's a couple months old. It started off in a clubhouse room where a couple people were trying to learn how to use Lightning, and they all jumped into Telegram together and started setting up different custodial Lightning wallets and sending back and forth. And honestly, from there, it just grew into more Telegram groups, more how-to guides, all plebs helping each other. And it was never one, person or organization that made it into what it is. It was all these different people that created a library for it, that created a Wikipedia page for it, that started a meme warfare around it. And it just became PlebNet. It's like a community square, I like to call it, like a gathering point, a watering hole for people to learn about Lightning without having to feel like they are being intimidated by an organization or anyone with any motivation other than just open learning. And that's not to say that there are people that are part of huge companies that have joined PlebNet now, that are actually learning from PlebNet and contributing to it as well. So it's become a nice symbiosis between what's out there and what people and the plebs.
Well, let's go into more detail about what actually Lightning Network is and why people might use it. In terms of the girth conversation, I do want to say I was part of the Lightning Torch, and that was two or 3 years ago. So it was one of the first big, it was when it was first launched, the Lightning Network. And I was handed the torch at like $120 and had to pass it on. And there were no Telegram groups for it, no nothing, nowhere to learn how to hand this torch on. and Max was with me. We were up until like 2 a.m. trying to figure out how to send this we had to add $10 to it, like how to send this on to the next torchbearer. And it was the most stressful time, 2 or 3 or 4 hour period of my life, as everybody on Twitter was screaming for me to hand it over, hand it over. Where is it? Where is it? And I was like, I don't know how to hand it over because of that girth. I didn't know how to open and close the channel. So I was short by $1 or something like that. But so like, what is the purpose of Lightning in your mind? Like, how would the ordinary person just hearing about Bitcoin, how do they get their head around Lightning?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I remember that lightning torch too. Everybody that studied paused for more than 4 hours, you'd be berated by all of Twitter saying, you don't know what you're doing, you're stealing the money. So I'm sorry I had to go through that. But you know, the overall concept in my mind of Lightning, or why we use it, is because people today are using Visa for lightning fast transactions. And the only difference is they're paying a small percentage of money and information to make that transaction. And if there is a way that you can do that without having to give up any of that information or give up any of that extra percentage that they take from you, then and the community can do it for you, then I think people as a whole realize this is something that's worth all of us doing together. And I like to think of it as if you're at a bar and you have a bar tab and everybody else can buy drinks from that bar, but it's a trustless system of them buying drinks, then that's kind of the way it is. Like the bartender and you and everybody else, we're all trading, exchanging information. And then at the end of the night, we just make one transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain to confirm everything that we did during the drinking hours. So I really feel like, with that kind of sense of community, everybody's in the bar together, just passing drinks around. It's that freedom. Like no one's taxing you to pass the drink to your friend,
Mm-hmm.
or for them to pass the drink down the line, there's no tax for that. And that's kind of the way I feel why it's so valuable to people to use it. Because imagine that bar being global,
Yeah, when Bitcoin started out 10 years ago or so, when we were involved, and people had this notion of we're going to live on Bitcoin, and they would travel the world and try to pay for stuff in Bitcoin. And it was somewhat awkward, and it was possible, but not really practical. But with Lightning, it's like people are actually living on Lightning, and there is a lifestyle that's evolving with Lightning and people running their own nodes. I want to get your comment on this. During the recent Elon Musk debate or presentation under what they called the B word, along with Jack Dorsey, he made a comment in passing that, quote, nobody wants to run their own Bitcoin node. Or by extension, he would have also said Lightning node. What is your thought about that?
Yeah, I saw that. And I had to watch it twice, really, because there's two things that really irked me about what he said. One, he was saying that he heard some small countries happen to be using Bitcoin and the Lightning Network. And coming from a place that I do not consider small, that has 3.1 million people, El Salvador has over 7 million people. That's not a small country. And second of all, them using Lightning as their legal tender is not just them experimenting. So, I took offense, not offense, but I took offense to that statement. Jamaica's a big country. We have a lot of girth in Jamaica. And then secondly, I really feel like when he talked about the average person is not going to want to run their own node. I mean, PlebNet has over 1,600 people. No, I'm lying. That's outdated. It has over 2,500 people now. Over 450 of them are running their own node. And half of these people have never touched a command line in their life. Some of them are farmers. Some of them are, barely, they had to go figure out what a Raspberry Pi was. Like they don't know how to code. These are normal people who are just knew about Bitcoin because they weren't egotistical enough to bypass it more than 2 or 3 times, that whole 3-touch rule. And they just tried for themselves. There are people in there that were asking us how to plug in a USB plug. These are normal people, and they're all running Bitcoin nodes, and they're all participating in the network, and they're all helping the network to grow stronger. It's every additive is exponential. And I would think that Elon of all people would understand what exponential means, but the average human being doesn't. So since he seems to be average, I don't think he might not either. So.
Right. So it's layer 2, right? Again, we've been talking about layer 2 solutions for Bitcoin for many years. And during the early days, when this conversation about what could potentially be what is now called layer 2 was discussed, a lot of the early programmers, they went a couple of different ways. You had the big blockers who were frustrated that there wasn't enough competition with Visa, and they wanted to put more transactions per block, and that resulted in the hard forks that we saw in 2017. You also had an early developer with Vitalik Buterin, who decided that he wasn't happy with how the project was going, and he forked off himself, essentially, and created Ether, which is trying to create a different environment for transactions, etc. Now, with Lightning and with PlebNet and KYC Jelly, which I guess is the Twitter handle, you can tell me more about that. But you know, all of the hand wringing and consternation that was going on there for so long, and which resulted in so many of these what are called altcoins. It seems that we're at a place now in the Bitcoin history where now almost all of those altcoins are really going to wither away because they're not based on the Bitcoin, and layer 2 does everything that they said they were going to do. So a lot to ask you there, Dred, in terms of, am I correct in that assumption? And what is KYC Jelly?
Yeah, I think if we were to narrow down all the altcoins out there to that, a lot of their purposes being higher transactions or faster transactions or cheaper fees or all that kind of stuff that they claim they can do, then yes, I feel like we're at a point where all that will be obsoleted based on this current technology that is growing. I think if they come up with some other new, passionate reason, I don't know, saving humanity with bananas on the blockchain, I don't know what it might be, but then we can have that discussion again. But all their current points, yes, they'll be obsoleted. And KYCjelly.com, Walton says it best, to be honest, but his English accent makes it sound really nice. But KYCjelly.com was a meme, honestly, when we started PlebNet, to try and see how we can ease people into Lightning a little bit better, and especially because there's a debate about there being a little bit more privacy functionality within the Lightning Network when you're using it, that you don't have to worry about KYC as much. The easing them into figuring that out would have been the KYC Jelly joke. So they tell it better than I can. But I would definitely say that if you want to know about these jokes and all the memes that we have, you should definitely go to KYCjelly.com.
Right. So it's a play on KYC, or Know Your Customer rules. And the Know Your Customer.
And lube.
And lube, right, of course. And girth. It comes back to, wow. I see it now. I see it, Stacy.
Right. That's the interesting thing, is that these communities that develop around it, in the early days, you need it, right? I mean, Max and I went in 2004 or 5, like, to a vlogging conference, and there were vlogging communities of how to vlog, how to video blog. And now obviously everybody does it, right? Because everybody's figured it out. They all have a camera at home. They could do that sort of stuff. So with the Lightning Network and all of the functionality around it, as I was saying, it's like, it was difficult for me. It wasn't easy to onboard myself 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago. Even though I had been in Bitcoin for like 10 years at that point, or 9 years at that point. And now we're seeing the emergence of not only the communities, but also services and products, like Blockstream is just out with something new, how to easily get on board and create your own Lightning node. So presumably one day this will also be as easy as, Swan Bitcoin or, Cash App, super simple interface that people won't even need to know all this stuff about how to really connect the node.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, if you look at what they've done with multisig or coin control right now, that's built into the wallets that you use, I feel like in the future, kind of like Moon, but maybe non-custodial, it'll be all built in so much, you'll just call it Bitcoin. And you might not even be able to realize you're using an on-chain transaction versus the Lightning transaction, depending on who you are.
That's a good point. And, Max had mentioned, or you had mentioned first, like, about this being global money, and you're a true digital nomad. Like right now, we saw you in Austin. You were at the Fuck Elon event in Austin. You're going to be at the Fuck Elon event in Phoenix. Right now, you're in Cartagena. Like how Bitcoin makes you a global citizen, right? Like, do you feel in a way you're obviously Jamaican, but you're a Bitcoiner? Like wherever you go, you can find a Bitcoiner, right? What's the scene like in Cartagena?
Yeah, I really feel that way. And the scene here, it's to me like many big cities where the majority seem to not really be aware, but every now and again you'll find one or this we use Bitcoin, or we know about the store of value, or and then you realize that there's a huge network of people here that have a flow of Bitcoin coming from Venezuela all over the place through South America. I haven't been able to find a Bitcoin meetup here since I've been doing more, I guess, R&R versus Bitcoin research. But definitely there is a community here that I would love to get in touch with. And so while I'm here for a couple more days, if there are any people out there in Cartagena that want to link up with me, send me a DM. But it seems to be a beautiful place that could really use the global money that we're providing, that Bitcoin provides, right?
So you've also spent a lot of time in El Salvador down at Bitcoin Beach, and you're going to other parts of Colombia as well. What did you think of that, with the Bitcoin, the B word, that conversation, the talk that was supposed to take place between Dorsey and Elon, which was not really that interesting, but the bit from Cathie Wood where she said, in regards to this ESG, environment, social, and governance, she said that Bitcoin was the strongest in S, the social, and that it gave like the sovereignty and the empowered ordinary people all around the world. What did you see in El Salvador at Bitcoin Beach? What was your experience there?
Yeah, I'm so happy that Cathie said that. She's like the one person that stood up on that call for me, But El Salvador was really, it was a mix, because when I wasn't in El Zonte or even next door at El Tunco, you didn't feel the same buzz that you felt about Bitcoin in the town. Like, outside of it, it was much more of a curiosity and a doubt, and same like everybody else has when they're trying to adopt something new. But in the nucleus of it, where it started, where people like Mike Peterson and Ramon and Jose, where they all started, it was from the ground up. Like they had social programs that started, and then from there, people actually were helping each other and getting paid in Bitcoin. And then from there, all the stores started buying and selling using Bitcoin and Lightning. And to me, it just felt like I was in a place that had already gone through the transformation into hyperbitcoinization. And they kind of like felt it already. And the only thing they had left to do is just completely convert to the unit of account being that, as opposed to the US dollar. But their method of payment was already there. The medium of exchange was already there. Their store of value was already there. And their mindset for earning was already there. So they were so much closer than anywhere else I've been in the world, which is why I want to go back. I'm probably going to go back this weekend to go hang out with them. But to me, that's the experience I got. I feel like if anybody wants to experience what it is to be closer than we are now to hyperbitcoinization, I would go to El Salvador and spend a weekend there.
Huh, that's so interesting. So you're saying they're the closest you've been anywhere, and you've been all across the US, all across the world, that they're the most hyperbitcoinized.
Yeah, I believe that. I think hyperbitcoinization is much more of a mindset than just technology. And they have both, to be honest with you, because everyone has a Bitcoin wallet. They just don't have as many off ramps as you'd want into, whatever shitcoin currency you decide to off ramp into. But they definitely have the mindset. Yes.
So we also talk about mindset all the time on Orange Pill Podcast, and we call it Renaissance 2.0. You're also in the music business, or do some music production, a music producer?
No.
No?
Not at all.
Oh,
Not at
I
all.
thought I saw.
I hung out with some people, but I'm definitely not. I mean, yeah.
But you have your own podcast now.
Yeah, definitely have my own podcast now. The most I've done for music is practice the bass, and I think I'm still pretty terrible at it for now, but I still practice every day and see how it goes.
Oh, I think we were talking about music producers, but what's the point of your podcast? Like, what's the theme? What are you looking for, and what sort of coverage are you doing?
Yeah, it's called One Love Bitcoin. Obvious play off of Bob Marley's One Love. It's it's basically me feeling like I'm already living this digital nomad life. I'm traveling around the world while working, trying to meet different Bitcoiners and talk to them and figure out, how how realistic is it that the world is going to become hyper Bitcoinized, and what stories do people have to tell along the way? And I was doing it for myself, and then Corey from Swan reached out to me and said, "Hey, you should probably do a show. See if you want to make this a thing." And we didn't know what it was going to be in the beginning. It was just brainstorming, and then eventually, we came up. We came up with the idea of having it one-on-one sessions with people, and then I came up with the idea of being people from all over the world, because I wanted to travel the world anyway. So why not tell the stories of the people from every country and how they got to Bitcoin, and also how their country is handling this new absolute scarce digital money that we've never had before, and how it's changing their country. And that became my mission. It's like, I want to go to every country, every sovereign nation or jour, however you want to call them. And I want to see if I can get one person to tell me on the ground how it is, not necessarily some, oligarch or someone in an ivory tower. I want the people that are actually in the streets seeing the currency devalue or not, if it's, Germany, but I want to see what they think from the ground up and then tell that story. So, and then I want to do it with a lot of Jamaican flair and love,
Yeah. You were talking about the mindset in Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador, and as being the most, I guess you could say, cutting edge in terms of hyper Bitcoinization. We see the folks over at Paxful in Nigeria also talk about this, because Nigeria has gone pretty heavily, deeply into Bitcoin. The penetration's pretty high there. And, when people talk about it, they talk about it as if, they talk about the people having a real positivity about things. Is that part of the mindset that comes with Bitcoin, and why is that?
That's a really good question. So, just so I understand your question correctly, you're asking why do people seem so positive about Bitcoin in these places where they would otherwise feel negatively?
Yeah, what I'm saying is that the Bitcoin, hyper Bitcoinization, the mindset that we were talking about a moment ago, and describing it in very positive terms, and in terms that would sound very different than what was there before, or even in towns right next to it. You're saying when I leave El Zante, even going to the next town, I don't feel the buzz, I don't feel the lift. So that, the question is Bitcoin, is it elevating people's overall positivity, and why is that?
Yeah. Well, in general, it seems to be that the more they know, the happier they are. I know that seems like such a straightforward answer to say, but it really feels that way. Like the people that are outside of that bubble, or outside of that growing buzz about Bitcoin, like in San Salvador, for example, they just don't know enough, right? They just didn't know that they could have it on their phone. They didn't know that, smartphones with wallets that are free, you could just have Bitcoin. They didn't even know that the government was giving out Bitcoin to them, in some places. Well, so I feel like the knowledge that people, as they find more knowledge in the subject, and as they dispel more of the fears with the facts that they can prove for themselves, they seem to become happier. And then, of course, the proof is in the pudding. So once they get skin in the game, whether they've earned it or they were sent it via remittance from the US, because they have a high percentage of remittance, and they're able to see it not disappear, even if it's volatile, it doesn't disappear based on a bank fee or a government mandate. It's free market money. Then that seems to give them more hope. Me and Roman Martinez talked about hope being the main thing that made them more happy, and I feel like they're getting hope, so they're being happier.
Right, and the main focal point in the town is called Hope House, and we see images of that. Now, getting back to Elon Musk's comments, when he was referring to El Salvador as a little country experimenting with Bitcoin, he really seemed to be bashing El Salvador and the people of El Salvador, and in a way that was really, unbecoming, I guess you could say. But what he doesn't get is that, and maybe this has something to do with the mindset, is that we're talking about individual sovereignty. You know, everybody is their own sovereign under Bitcoin, and how big your country is doesn't matter, because, and what we're seeing is that the biggest countries in the world are entering a fiat money collapse. So it's really the Bitcoin nation globally where civilization is moving. Just like when Rome collapsed, you know, civilization went east. It went to the Middle East and the Far East is where civilization went. It left Western Europe. It came back much later. So civilization is moving to Bitcoin. And or do you think that's too much of overstating the fact?
No, I actually agree with you. And I feel like, you know, to take it a step further, not only is civilization moving from these, you know, flesh and blood or flesh and bone geographically locked, you know, common mindsets of called nations. I think it's also, not to sound like a doomsday person, but it just like when Rome and civilization ended there and everything moved, it left the dark ages. And the people that would be left in these civilizations that we consider today, as everyone moves into this new cyber world, cyber global citizenship of Bitcoin, people who are still hanging on to the old world will be left in the dark ages in a certain sense. And that could look pretty ugly in certain ways. So I really feel like his Drew Banzal said it best at the Fuck Elon concert, that he is so smart in so many different ways, and I applaud him for a lot of his technological capabilities, and, you know, being able to at least drive ideas to fruition, even if it's not him directly, because he has a big team that works with him to enhance his brilliance. But I feel like in some ways he's so misguided and mundane in his arrogance to think about, you know, things in such a limited amount of brain space. And that part of me makes me always say fuck Elon, because he's not using his brain for all the things he could be using it for, or maybe he's just not able to. I don't know. But not to go on a rant, it's just, you know, I feel like once the proof is in the pudding and even he realizes that the civilization he's trying to help is moving into a certain space, then maybe he'll follow if he's not a leader in this.
I also think, however, you know, Bitcoin is the way out of the dark ages. I feel like we've been in the fiat dark ages for the past 50 years since an all fiat world from 1971. And the positive side of the likes of Elon Musk being that stupid or uttering words like this is that it is allowing the least wealthy in terms of the fiat world, like El Salvador, like Nigeria. Nigeria, you know, their hyperbitcoinization was set in partly because of COVID, right? And the global financial system, the liquidity for dollars dried up, and they still were continuing their lives. It wasn't locked down there. So they still needed to import used cars from Japan. They needed to pay the suppliers. There was no way to do it because there were no dollars. So by necessity, they went to Bitcoin. You know, I think it's a positive that, in a way, like the wealthy Americans don't see it as much. Like, there's no necessity at the moment. Necessity will come for them one day. But the fact that the necessity is all over the world, outside in the developing nations right now, I think that's, in a way, a way to distribute Bitcoin all around the world.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, a lot of the privilege of the 18% of people in the world that are privileged to have financial access and huge, you know, access to loan money and credit, most of them are in America or in the first world nations like that. So it's a really good point. Never thought of that. And I got that from Alex Gladstein, that 18% of people have like full access to financial tools, where the rest of them are somewhat locked out of either credit or actual bank accounts, or, you know, being able to transact online.
So I know for a fact, I mean, I got your music producer thing. I thought you were doing some music now, but I know for a fact you did work in the sort of, you know, that top tier financial services, sort of consulting services sort of world. So in the last moments here, like what are your thoughts on them? I know JP Morgan this past week just opened up crypto investments to all of their clients. how do you think, how do they navigate a post-fiat world? How do they navigate a hyper-Bitcoinized world?
Wow. Well, first, just to qualify, I was in the technology world, not really necessarily directly finance, or even though I worked for a couple as a contractor, but in general, God, they are so deeply stymied and deeply rooted in that world. I don't know if they can. I don't know if they can survive. I feel like if any of them do survive, they're going to be coming out like a phoenix, because they're all going to die. They're all going to burn, and then whatever comes out of that would be a phoenix, right? Or ash. But I just don't. I don't see them surviving.
Speaking of Phoenix, we're all going to be in Phoenix on August 19th at the Fuck Elon party. Dredd will be there. Max and Stacy, other Bitcoiners. It's going to be a continuation of the fun we had in Austin. And so we're all looking to get together again, Stacy.
It's going to be one big love.
One big love. Now, since I have you on here, I got a question pertaining to Rastafarian music and Bob Marley. So the lyrics "Try Jah Love" what is Jah?
Jah Rastafari. He is the one, King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. You guys would call God.
Okay, so Jah is a shortened version of this.
Yeah, it's a shortened version. Jah is, it's like a what's the word when you kind of create a knightdom or a title for somebody. It's like a royal title. So when when the emperor of Ethiopia was crowned, he was considered to be Jah Rastafari. He was born Rastafari, and he became Jah Rastafari, Emperor of Ethiopia, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering land of the tribe of Judah. And people referred to him as the second coming of Jesus in the Rastafarian religion. And he is, one with the Creator, part of the Holy Trinity. Like, that is the Lord. So when you say Jah, you're talking about the Lord. You don't have to necessarily believe that whole part of it, but you're talking about a deity of religious beliefs, just like the Christians or the Muslims. Right? Yeah, all have their names and their originations, right? And that's the Rastafarian version of it.
Right. Now, also in Jamaica, the Jamaican Central Bank, I don't know if it's still true, but I believe it's run by either one woman or two women, and they do a lot of social media. And it's very interesting. It's what's your feeling about these women? Who are these women, and are they doing a good job, or what can you tell us about it? Anything?
I wish I could tell you anything about the women. I don't know. I need to do a lot more research on the central bank in general and find out, who these people are, what their backgrounds are, etc. But I can tell you that the videos they're putting out are, in my opinion, not good. They are giving false information about inflation being good, and about how you need to support your government and your central banks in keeping the inflation at an acceptable rate. I don't know when people should be accepting an acceptable rate of theft, an acceptable rate of burglary in your house. Like, Conan, only take 2% of my stuff every time you come in and rob me. Let's sing about it and make a cute music video. Sorry, I'm going on a rant again. The point is that I feel like their marketing strategy sucks, and it's because their message sucks. And that's something that I don't think they can change, because it's inherent in the system that they support, and they're just going to be part of the ashes at some point.
Part of the ashes. I love that. And I love that we're leaving the fiat dark ages, and Bitcoin One Love is here.
Yep,
all right.
Around the world.
I'm feeling it. La 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 la.
I hope you're ready to smash buy at swanbitcoin.com/orange pill. Yes, they brought that interview with Dredd to you. Check out his podcast, One Love.
One Love podcast gets me high over at Swan. I like to smash by. Well, that was fascinating. We're going to probably end up doing an event in Jamaica. Dredd is the advanced team. We're scouting out a venue in Jamaica right now to do probably in January of 2022. Do a Fuck Elon tour event in Jamaica, Mon. And so it's all very, very exciting.
Definitely. The thing is, the people of Phoenix have been saying that Max needs to wear shorter shorts.
Yes.
When we get to Jamaica, Max is definitely going to wear a string bikini. And so you'll have to go to Jamaica to see this. You'll have to be there to witness Max in a string bikini.
A mankini.
That's right.
Yeah. The kind that Borat wore in that first Borat film. Borat. That's the way it goes. That's the way it is. That's the way it has to be, because we're getting down with it. Getting down.
Right. So we were talking about the portrait of Dorian Gray.
Yeah.
And
oh yeah.
You know, the decay is obvious, right? And this is the thing that Bitcoin exposes, and what Lightning Network is bringing to the world as a way out.
Really?
But here in this analogy I have, where the U.S. empire is like the Dorian Gray.
Yes, that's excellent. Really fine.
Yeah. And then you look at places like Central America, El Salvador being one of them. You see the mass migration out of Central America to the United States. These people take on huge risks, crossing like all sorts of land and territory to get to the border, risk their lives because of the portrait of Dorian Gray. That is the U.S. empire and the U.S. dollar. Like, that's direct. They're part of that grotesquerie of the actual portrait of the world under this fiat standard. Like, this is that shouldn't happen. That shouldn't need to happen. While yes, people should be free to travel from one place to the other, I believe, they shouldn't be forced to like that. Just like they're forcing the balance in your electronic, digital dollar account to go down. They're forcing these people to have to take on risks that maybe they don't want to take.
Yes, they are force feeding the risk. Right. And so we talked many years ago about the externalities that are part of corporations in the energy business, for example, where they are engaged in energy exploration and development, and it results in tremendous amount of ecological devastation, but they consider it an externality from their current business, and they don't have to pay for it, right? It ends up being paid for by the taxpayer. So with the US dollar's Dorian Gray period, it has attracted the worst amongst us to get jobs on Wall Street to go print trillions of dollars for themselves. The externalities to this have been disease, addiction, opiate overdoses, cities collapsing. And that's the externality associated with the activity of printing money. These two are married. They are just like a peel to an apple. They are the plum and the pit and the pendulum. They are, right? You cannot separate the two. But what happens is that in the political sphere, in the media sphere, they like to think that there's no connection, just like on the portrait of Dorian Gray. For a while, there was no connection. He remained young, and the portrait was getting old, and there was no connection. There was just parallel universes. And then they collided, and all came back. And you see that you can't separate the two. So the U.S. right now, since the 1980s, as you point out, has been on the free ride of money printing at the world's expense. Now the world has had enough, and they're rejecting the dollar. George Washington's portrait is now looked at as an ugly old hag, and they don't want to own any of that shit anymore. And so what was already irrevocably attached will be more obviously irrevocably attached, and that is that the dollar is worthless shit coin, and the consequences would be catastrophic. Just like if you took all the cost of Exxon's external environmental damage and suddenly put it back on the balance sheet of Exxon would have to immediately declare bankruptcy within 5 seconds, right? Because it's overwhelming amount of ecological disaster the energy industry has perpetrated relative to their balance sheets. They could not possibly handle that. All of the risk that America put onto other countries' balance sheets is coming home to roost. The chickens are coming home to roost. And that risk is 5 to 8 times bigger than the entire GDP of the United States. So, we're gonna see something quite spectacular here.
Well, they've the rebirth. They didn't want the rebirth. They didn't want the Renaissance. They tried everything to avoid the moment that Bitcoin delivered, which is the revelation, right? Bitcoin revealed all of this. They tried everything. They extend and pretend, the separating risk and reward, as you have covered many times in the past, where they, use of derivatives, where they took all the reward. How Dorian Gray is that, right? Like, he gets to keep all the beauty, and all the risk is piled onto this painting. All the decay, all the rot, all the entropy, everything is poured onto the painting.
Yeah, called a pension fund.
Yeah, that's your pension fund. That's the homeless encampment outside your property in Venice Beach. These are those. That's the separation. That's the one side gets all the beauty, gets all the wealth, gets all the reward. The other side gets all the risk.
Right. So the story is brilliant, and so it's written by
Oscar Wilde.
Oscar Wilde, right? So it's a brilliant story in that sense, and the story is telling us that you cannot separate these things, right? It's impossible, and it's a false dawn, a false promise to think that you can. You just can't do it. So, I mean, it's such a trope. It's such a meme. It's such a well-known the portrait of Dorian Gray. It survived for so many years. It's such a brilliant, it's like on a par with the Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein, right? Yeah. I mean, Frankenstein became, buzzword instantly. And we've had it for, I think that book is 150 years old, I believe.
Yeah.
Am I right? Or am I completely off base?
So, like, once you separated the risk and reward, as Dorian Gray did, like, the fact is, like, it was in order to be, like, immoral and decadent. There was no cost to his decadence.
Right.
To him. And the same thing is, there's no cost to the decadence of empire, to a certain group of wealthy American elite deep state sort of controllers, commanding controllers. Yeah,
I was right. Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, was written in 1818, which is incredible.
I thought I would have put it at like 1840, but I guess, okay.
I mean, that's an amazing book, really, at the time, because it really encapsulated and predicted modernity, like the consequences of modernity, and we are now living in the consequences of modernity. Remember, in 1800, my God, this was really wasn't what we associate with true modern life. Was not even the glint in Thomas Edison's eyes at that point. So that was a very far-reaching, predictive masterpiece. And it's just become so much part of the vernacular, like Portrait of Dorian Gray. I mean, this is the role of the artist that we keep harping on this show over and over again, is that, people don't understand that artists live in a place that is and should be protected and encouraged, because it gives people a way to dive into the parallel worlds that exist outside of their own mundane drudgery that is most people's lives. And so it offers hope, and it offers imaginative boosts along all chakras to dive into your own personal parallel universe. And, people miss out on that, particularly if the state takes over culture and if free speech is thwarted, as it's being in the US right now. That means shutting down art. That means shutting down expression. That means shutting down all novels, all works of art, all plays, all theatrical plays, everything gets shut down. Nazi Germany was not known for its comedy club scene, right? Because there was no free speech. And this is what is happening in the US and around the world right now. They're shutting down all expression. That means all expression. That means that unless you have your little red book from Mao and you're saying the right thing at the right time, you're going into the gulag. And the gulag happens to be totally electronic, and the money is becoming the money of the gulag that expires in 18 months unless you buy these things from this store at this time. If you don't, then the walls around your house go into the ground, and you're out in the wasteland, to quote T.S. Eliot, and you're in the fucking zombie land. And that's what they're setting up. And Bitcoin is the only way to fight against it, because it's the only way to convert your fiat money, financial terrorism, into freedom right? Americans used to think this way. I mean, we beat an empire back in 1776 on this notion, but there's very little of it yet left around today, though.
Once you see the portrait of Dorian Gray, you can't ever really engage with Dorian in the same way. And I think that's what has happened. Hyperbitcoinization is here, and it's delivered that we've basically seen the portrait of the American dollar.
Yeah, like a lot of people go to El Salvador, they'll go to El Zante, and they'll be like, you know what, I'm going to live here. And they're like, I love it here. It's great. I love the vibe. I love the mindset. And then come April the next year, they're like, wait a minute, I have to still pay taxes to America, even though I don't live there anymore? What's this? Oh, yeah, just like North Korea, the IRS has dominion over every corner of the face of the globe, no matter where you are, Mr. America and Mrs. America. They tax you on any income, all income, just like North Korea does. It's the only two countries that do this. So you're a fucking slave, bitch. And that's the way the world is.
Right. So this is a good time to end right now. But on a relentless optimistic note, I would say Bitcoin has revealed that the US dollar is Dorian Gray, who has sold its soul to the devil, the fiat devil. And luckily we have Bitcoin to reveal all that is true.
This is the real Max.
Why are you showing it to the computer?
I'm showing it to the people.
The people up there on the camera. They can't see it.
People? Where are the people?
The people are right here.
That's where the people are?
Yeah, they see it now.
I thought it was this other camera.
Yeah, I know.
Can they see it
always
here?
look into it, but it's
here?
not.
Look at this guy.
Talk to the camera.
How about this? Look at this. Can you hear me? This is what happened to this guy.
This is the portrait of Max Kaiser.
Look at this.
He's just gone horribly. It's gone horribly wrong.
This is what happened starting 20 years ago. This is the real Max. He got shrunk into this plastic doll. Then this took over. The portrait of Max Kaiser took over. Where's this going?
Well, this is definitely time to end this episode. So
the camera's up there? Jesus, I've been looking at the wrong one this whole time. For how many episodes? 50?
Actually, I ordered a new camera, by the way.
Oh, great.
So.
Just when I figured out how to use this one. We're going to have another one. That's the way it always goes. I never know where to look on this show. Oh, it's great. How you doing? Great to see y'all.
Okay, well, this episode is brought to you by swanbitcoin.com/orange pill. Make sure you stack some sats so you don't end up looking like a grotesque portrait of
You don't get your head shrunk in a little plague doll. That's what happens. You got a swan, you got to smash by. You get your head shrunk. A little pinhead. Don't let that happen. Wait, where is everyone going? Turn on these machines.